That's something that you posted the other day, and I was like,
Hello everybody, thank you for joining us this evening. Welcome to Ashley Goldberg's new book, Abomination. Ashley is in conversation with Fiona Robertson, and the event's being preceded by a short salon with readers Thomas Lewis and Kaya Polsheimer. Before we commence, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Naga and Zerbil people, and traditional owners of the lands from which people are zooming in on tonight. I also pay my respects to elders past and present and acknowledge that we are on unceded land. A little housekeeping before we begin. If everyone could switch their phones to silent, you're welcome to keep them on, of course, so you can tweet about it. We are at AWO 4101. Anybody requiring the toilet, you're probably familiar with the internal staircase at Avid that will get you there. Otherwise, there's one straight out through here, just head towards the light. The bar will open again after this event if anybody wants to grab a drink. There will be a Q&A at the conclusion of the event. We ask that the chair repeat the questions before the author answers them for the benefit of the Zoom audience at home. People watching on Zoom at home, you are also able to ask questions. There's a chat box there that you can ask your questions in, and we'll also be pasting a link where you can buy a copy of the book online, and if you do so during the course of this event, we can ask the author to sign it for you at the end. On to the first Salon reader. Tonight it's Thomas Lewis, who studies literature and Latin at UQ, where he edits Jacker and the Journal. His poetry focuses on soulish conundrums and overshares on his personal life, and his criticism seeks to help people understand better the art they perceive. You can read his latest work in VoiceWorks. Please make him welcome.
Right, so I have home. We're doing a Torah against the Brisbane public transport system. So I got in, but I've settled on a poem. Anyway. And stop to see a moment. Reach out, caress the daunting march of time, for life is fleeting presence, to be treated as the vineyard does his vine. Not late, but dark, and the air is tired. Empty bottles in a kitchen cleaned recently. Tiles still quiver with movement. The light bulbs are still warm. Two bodies on the carpet. They too are warm. What word but towering for the bookshelf, shading these two from the pictures that hide in paint. Towering, caramel splintered wood pockmarked with chocolate holes, a lexical river unrelenting with rafts of Dickensian green, Austinian silver, Proustian black, most reliable orange motorhomes. As in autumn, books have drifted from their home onto the twilight carpet and into snowy hands. It is the Yeats, a little one lost inside another book just now found, but that is another moment. This one is poetry strange with love and death and regret and those totemic emotions, not created nor destroyed, only evoked. It is spoken, for she has said only if you read it to me, he smiles, for he has been wanting this, for he lives within these words. And she is in his house, but now listening, she is where he lives. So his voice is sonorish, yet soft and somehow shy. It's like he has two voices that they meet here, that there's an ever subtle harmony playing between them. It is like apple and cheddar grilling. It is like when birds call is a memory in the wind. And she does not speak as much. When she does, her voice is a little canorous and mellow but strong. It is a strong voice but worn too tired. It's like a scarf with fraying edges or wood wanting varnish. It tastes of giggles. There's a spell being woven by these poems. It summons invisible hands or sculpts the air, but somehow her head falls onto his shoulder. He is no fighter, his shoulder is soft and welcoming, just glad to be involved. They breathe each other in, already forgetting what the other smells like, nice. She has already assured him. So they know the other and know themselves, but to have smelt roses and hawthorns alone is not to have swallowed their intermingling. It is more. It is drenched in loneliness and anxiety and melancholy. These are other moments, a horde of other moments casting each other towards this one's walls, fractured and thin and holding only by some eidetic exegesis, some vivid study of a handful of glances and words, some repudiation of the problem of other minds, holding here in words. And how long can this moment last? It is a moment. It is ephemeral, it is eternal. For the boy and the girl, what else are we on the floor, awed by poetry, it ends. But to two warm bodies, maybe there is no end. Maybe like a grape to a barrel, to a glass, to the sea, to heavy clouds over vineyards, there is always something in perpetuum, enclosed in a mnemonic gyre, spinning as if on a turntable, spinning music without end. It whispers a head and a shoulder. Isn't it better? Better than all those other moments to come? Maybe the next moment was even sweeter. Maybe the next moment was bitter as lions. Here there is always another stanza, another tenor of his voice, mystery to hers. Maybe beneath a ceiling the colour of morning pigeons, and on a carpet as soft as childhood beds, there remain her head upon his shoulder. Maybe.
Our next reader, Kaya Holzheimer, works in the community sector by day and sings opera at night. In between, she reads and writes speculative fiction. She's a 2018 graduate of the Odyssey Writing Workshop, a 6 weeks residential workshop held in Manchester, New Hampshire. Please make her welcome.
I like the way Thomas is sitting, so I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to read a little bit from a novella in progress. The working title is Yearn. This is part of the first chapter. Ingrid looked up at the water in time to see a little wave come in and wash over Shelley's face. Ingrid started, but Shelley stood up, spluttering slightly, wiping water out of her eyes. She coughed, then waded toward the beach. Ingrid consciously relaxed her shoulders and smiled a greeting, careful not to say anything about unpredictable waves. But Shelley dried herself off without looking at her mother, then spread her towel on the damp sand and plopped down on top of it. She gazed out at the ocean. Shelley? Hello? Shelley didn't even turn her head. Hi. Ingrid gripped a handful of sand so hard it squinched. She let it go. How was the swim? Fine, until that stupid boat came along. Oh, you could hear it in the water. Well, they're loud, I guess. Shelley folded her arms around her knees. Shell, you're okay? Shelley kept her eyes on the ocean. No, Mum, I'm not okay. I'm in some sort of weirdo deadbeat town going to school with people I don't know and don't want to know, and now it seems I have to live near a stupid powerboat. So no, not okay. Oh, Shelley, you know why we're here. You know why we left, why we can't contact anyone we know. But that doesn't mean I'm okay with it. And it's fine for you. All your friends were his friends anyway. Ingrid winced. So I get why we can't talk to them, but none of my friends were his friends. Some of my friends had never even met him. He probably doesn't even know who they are. They probably all think I'm dead or kidnapped. She twisted her body round and glared at Ingrid. Yeah, Mum, they probably all think you kidnapped me. Ingrid pressed her palms flat on her towel, letting their heels sink into the soft, giving sand beneath. He most certainly did know who Shell's friends were, and he most certainly knew how to keep an eye on them through social media. He'd know, in a heartbeat, if any of them heard from Shell, and then he'd work out how to find them. Shell, we've talked about this. I know, it's just so stupid, it's so unfair. Ingrid gave herself a couple moments, a couple deep breaths. But we're okay, Shell. We're okay together. I just want what's best for you, for us. Perhaps we can be each other's best friends. Shelley rolled her eyes. Well, just for a bit. Oh, Shelley, I know it's not perfect. That's for sure. But it's better than it was. Even as Shelley flung her gaze back out over the sea, Ingrid saw her face crumple. Ingrid shuffled across the sand and put her arm around her daughter. I just miss everyone so much, Mum, and they don't even know where I am. No one knows where I am. It's like I don't exist anymore. The tears came hot and fast. Shelley swiped them away. And I know why we left, and I don't want to cry. Ingrid put her other arm around her girl, and that broke the dam. She let her sob and sob for all she'd lost. This, exactly this, was why Ingrid couldn't give an inch, why she needed to stay strong.
Thank you very much. It's almost time for the person of the hour, but before we introduce you to the person of the hour, please allow me to introduce you to the person who will introduce the person of the hour. It's Fiona Robertson. She's a writer and doctor. Her short fiction has been published in literary magazines and anthologies in Australia and the UK. Has been shortlisted for international competitions. A collection of stories, If You're Happy, won the Glendower Award for Emerging Queensland Writer at the 2020 Queensland Literary Awards. Fiona lives in Brisbane with her husband and children. Please make them both welcome.
Thanks, Jackie. So before we begin the conversation, on behalf of Ashley and myself, I'd like to express deep appreciation and respect to the Turrbal and Yagara people and elders on whose unceded land we're speaking tonight. I'd also like to thank fellow writers Tom Lewis and Kaya Homer for their beautiful readings. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce the author himself, Ashley Goldberg. Ashley Goldberg is an Australian writer based in Melbourne. His fiction has appeared in New Australian Fiction 2021, Meanjin, Chiron Review, The Honest Ulsterman, and award-winning Australian writing, among other publications. Ashley has an MA in creative writing from Bath Spa University and a graduate diploma of professional writing from Canberra University. His work has been shortlisted, longlisted, and anthologized in numerous competitions worldwide, including the 2017-18 Galley Beggar Press Short Story Prize and the Commonwealth Short Story Prize. In 2019, Ashley was a fellow at the Catherine Susanna Pritchard Writers Centre and a finalist for the Tasmanian Writers Prize. Getting very tired here. Abomination was shortlisted for the 2020 Kill Your Darlings Unpublished Manuscript Award. So Abomination is a remarkable debut and novel. It draws you in from the first line, and the pull of the narrative keeps you turning pages late into the night, or at least it did for me. It is first and foremost a bloody good story with vivid, true characters, compelling conflict, and intriguing developments. But it is also the kind of book that ticks over in your mind, revealing layer upon layer. Not every author can write something unforgettable, but that's what Ashley has done with Abomination. Congratulations, Ash.
Thanks, Fiona. You're too kind.
Not at all. So, getting straight into the questions to grill you. For those who haven't yet read this wonderful book, I know it's hard to believe, but there might be a few in the audience. Could you please give a brief summary of what it's about?
Yeah, no worries. I mean, it's been out for 6 weeks. What are you doing? Okay. So Abomination is a story about two young men, Ezra and Yonatan, who attended the same religious Jewish school as children in the year 1999. The school is called Yahel Academy. Then while they're attending the school, there is a sexual abuse scandal against one of the rabbis at the school, Rabbi Hirsch. And as a result, Ezra's parents, who are more secular, make the decision to pull him from the school, while Yonatan's parents leave him there and Yonatan remains. But the crux of the story really takes place 20 years later, when the boys are reunited at a rally for the extradition of that very rabbi, Rabbi Hirsch, from Israel. But now, Ezra, having been pulled from the school, is living life as a secular atheist, while Yonatan, who remained, is an ultra-Orthodox rabbi who even teaches at Yahel Academy, the school the boys went to. And the book explores their two simultaneous, but also independent crises of identity.
Yeah, there's so much in the book. It's a really rich and layered book. One thing that I found really interesting is that Yonatan is a deeply religious young man and rabbi, as you said, and Ezra is a Jewish young man who has largely abandoned his faith. With the background being at school, they were best friends. So as the novel progresses, we see each of the young men examining and questioning their faith and beliefs and behaviour for different reasons. So how did you feel as the author about these two seemingly disparate characters?
Well, most authors say that, there's inevitably parts of them in their book, and a question that's often asked is this autobiographical? And, obviously there's so much of myself in this book, aside from my name on the cover. So Ezra's narrative I see it as a contemporary narrative. He's living a secular life. His crisis is about modern themes, and I use his narrative to explore things that I'm interested in everyday life. It's about romantic relationships, it's about love, it's about depression, it's about bullying and the impact of that. There's so many family friendships, like so many things that I was able to explore using Ezra's narrative. While Yonatan's narrative, I do see it as a more singular narrative, as it's largely a questioning of faith. And that questioning is my questioning. I experienced the questioning of faith. I was brought up modern Orthodox, not ultra-Orthodox. The distinction being that the modern Orthodox Judaism tries to implement modern Orthodox society into Jewish practice, or ultra-Orthodox sects are often a lot more insular. So I experienced the questioning of faith, but my questioning was more gradual. It happened over time, and as a result of the input of so many different external factors. While Yonatan's questioning, and I don't want to give too much away, is a result of some more extreme experiences. And realistically, when you're in an ultra-Orthodox sect, you don't have the advantage that I had in those external factors to influence you.
Yeah, so there was a little of you in both of those characters, and you were able to explore some of your own sort of thoughts, feelings through both of them, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It's still a work of fiction, but but these characters, and whether or not their experiences mirror my own, definitely I use the narratives to explore themes and instances and emotions that I'm interested in.
Yeah, of course. So with the theme of religion, which is very prominent in the book, but there are other themes as well, sort of along that lines, themes of religion, morality, the ambiguity in all of us, love, failure to love, and shame was something that came through very strongly to me as a reader. I wondered if that was something that you were conscious about, writing about shame, and if you were, did you write about it on purpose, or was it something that just sort of came through in the work?
But it's been really interesting going through this experience of doing interviews and publicity, where so many different readers interpret the book in different ways, and there are so many themes in Abomination, and some people list them in terms of morality, there's family, there's friendships, there's love, etc., etc., etc. But what's interesting is the ones that come out that I wasn't conscious of. So shame is definitely one I did not write consciously, but what's been interesting as well is this idea of people telling me I thought the book was about this, and then me later thinking about it and going, well, maybe it is. I mean, I wrote this book a number of years ago, and I'm finding that I'm experiencing it in a different way. And as I said, that both characters are me in a way. Really, the book is me in a way as well, in that I use it to explore ideas that at the time when I was writing it that I was interested in. So there is this inherent relationship, absolutely, between morality, religion in particular, and Judaism and shame. So it's highly possible that while I didn't intend to, that shame features so prominently in the novel, because it's something that I am interested in as a result of my upbringing, being Jewish.
Yeah. I wondered, that sort of dovetails a little bit into the reading that you were interested in reading with us, because it does touch on notes of shame. I was wondering if you'd be happy to read that little bit to us now.
Yeah, no worries. So this is from early on in the book. So the book is based when the boys are 31, 32 years old. It's 20 years after the event, being the the allegations of abuse against Rabbi Hirsch. But there are numerous flashbacks in the book to when the boys were young. So we see a young Yonatan here who's first heard about the allegations against Rabbi Hirsch, who was a former teacher of his, and he wants to approach his father to ask about them, his father being a prominent community member. The day after they were sent home from school, Pinchas Singer found Yonatan after Shacharis and filled him in on the allegations Moshe had made against Rabbi Hirsch. A Paskudniak, they called him, monster, chazir, pig. The idea was difficult for Yonatan to reconcile with the image he held of his fifth grade teacher. A bushy brown beard flecked with red and always split by a large white smile, his front teeth hanging over his bottom lip. He was big. Not fat or imposing, but when Reb Hirsch was in a room, he seemed to fill up most of it. He encouraged the shy, challenged the boastful, and guided those who read poorly. It was rare for him to admonish anyone. His hands were large and covered in thick black hairs from wrist to knuckle. Yonatan remembered the weight of one on his shoulder, Hirsch looking down at him, smiling with those buck teeth and asking how he found his homework. Could that man have done such things? The idea plagued Yonatan all afternoon. Was it possible Moshe had been mistaken? Why would a man even want to do that to children? Could Rabbi Hirsch be both a good teacher and a monster? An hour or so before they normally left for Mincha, too conflicted to worry about disrupting him, Yonatan approached his father's closed study door and knocked. Come in, his father said. The study was small, or at least it appeared that way, cluttered as it was by books, a large desk, and his father's hulking frame. Nearly 2 meters tall, Yonatan's father was referred to as a giant in the community and in life. Wojciech, his father sat up and closed the Yerushalmi before him. What is it? We still have time, no? Yonatan nodded. Could I ask your advice, Abba? Of course, Wojciech, sit down. He gestured to the chair on the other side of his desk. He appeared to be in an affable mood, and Yonatan was glad. Yonatan sat. Where to begin? His father's eyes flicked to the side of his face. Yonatan hadn't realized he was twirling one of his payas. He dropped his hand to his lap. It's about Reb Hirsch. His father's lips tightened, but he didn't speak. The things people are saying about it, I cannot. Could he have? Yonatan took a breath. I did not know him like that. He was a good teacher. But if he did those things, how am I meant to feel about him now? I thought the Talmud might. Talmud? His father's eyes sharpened. What is it you think the Talmud says? I don't know. I thought that maybe, you don't know, but you thought to interrupt my study of the Almighty's will anyway. I'm sorry, I didn't. Do not speak to me of Talmud. His father's voice shook. He stood, curled his hand into a fist and raised it as though he might strike the desk. And do not speak of this again, not to me, not to anyone, Mevin. Yonatan froze. What had he done? Mevin, his father repeated. You understand, Yonatan? Wrinkles bunched up at the edges of his eyes. His cheeks were yellow, fleshy, and heavy. He looked old. Yonatan knew his parents had struggled to have children and that his arrival somewhat late in their lives was a surprise. A blessing from Hashem, his mother said. But Yonatan had never considered their age, and the sudden realization of it only added to the disquiet that he felt. Yes, Abba, he said. Good. Now go. Get ready for shul.
Thank you. It's a great taste of some of the things in the book, and I think that sense of suspense that is carried throughout the book as well. So on the topic of religion again, and in relation to the reading, it really is an integral part of the book and one of the most powerful subjects in the book. And as a reader, I felt that you wrote about the ultra-Orthodox Jewish religion in a way that was clear-eyed and thoughtful. You didn't sugarcoat some of the ways that religion of any denomination can be harmful, but neither did you shy away from depicting how religion and religious communities can guide and comfort people. And your portrayal of Yonatan was very sympathetic, arguably more so than your portrayal of Ezra. So I wondered if this was a deliberate strategy or did it come about in some other way?
It wasn't deliberate, not in any way. I think that my exploration of not just Yonatan's narrative, because obviously Ezra is grappling with his identity, but also in the sense that he was raised Jewish. He has this moral groundwork, this supposed moral groundwork that Judaism has given him, and he's wrestling with that. But Yonatan's narrative is what I use to really, I suppose, explore my own relationship with Judaism. And there is this really, like I imagine with all monotheistic or perhaps all religions in general, there is this inherent relationship with morality, with good and bad, and sins and not sins, and with Judaism it's just so fundamental, this really, it was not my intention to have a light touch. It wasn't my intention to not have a light touch. It's certainly rewarding to hear that people have received it in that way, that it wasn't too critical. But I suppose I've used this book to explore my relationship with Judaism, which does, there are just, I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but there are, I think for anybody that's a member of any religious community, you do see a certain amount of contradiction, often, and often from devout members of the community as well, or just certain levels of adherence, perhaps when there are, the word halacha, which is in the book often, means Jewish law. It means law. It's not something that you can bend or break. It's
not a suggestion.
No, it's a law. This is me grappling with my relationship with Judaism, and I certainly didn't intend for it to be necessarily as light as it is. I actually felt that I had come at it a little too harshly and was expecting a fair bit of blowback. And it's been lovely to hear that I have since not had that reception from readers, from within the Jewish community, from more Orthodox members of the Jewish community as well. So of course there's been a couple of comments here and there, but it's definitely in the minority. So it's very rewarding to hear that.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you were concerned, because I think anyone who's read the book would feel the same way as I have, that you've really walked in the shoes of both your main characters, and I guess all writers try to do that, and that your compassion for both characters comes through very clearly. Speaking of good and bad, and I guess moral ambiguity, one of the things, as I just said, that I really enjoyed about this novel is its pushback against the idea of people being good or bad. And in this novel, both main characters act in ways that aren't ideal or even fail to act when they should act, which is, problematic in itself. So both men also show kindness and compassion and wisdom. What can you talk a bit about this?
It's really interesting to me these ideas of good and bad, and I think it's something that one of the major things I think that I've had to come to terms with in terms of really growing up. I don't know if other people have this experience, perhaps individuals that are brought up within religions do, but I was definitely brought up with a hyperbolic moral code, in the sense that there is good at one end and there is bad at the other, but there's no real in between. And it's so interesting when you think about that as human beings and our actions in our day-to-day lives, and how how much of what we do is guided by an invariable number of factors, and then you take into account this other idea of whether or not are we responsible for that, because with this book, one of the other things I explore is the paths that people take in life, but also the paths we're placed on. So in this instance, you know, I don't think it's a spoiler in the sense that, you know, for Ezra, there's certainly a questioning of his morality, but a questioning that stems from this moral groundwork that potentially was provided to him from Judaism. So I often think of that in terms of myself. And so who would I be if not for the upbringing that I had? Would I be a worse person? Would I be a better person? Did this idea of this inherent good and bad, and what comes with that is definitely shame? Absolutely. There are some actions of mine that I would
so many.
that I would, you know, I've definitely felt, you know, this deep sense of shame. And, you know, and then at times I'll definitely reconcile with myself in my mind and go, but you know, you're not, it doesn't make you a bad person to necessarily do something that is, in this instance, it's like breaking Jewish law. So you break Jewish law, does that make you a bad person? Does that mean you should suffer significant consequences? Or are you, you know, the product of various circumstances? And also, are you not entitled to rehabilitation? The idea that, granted, let's say these were terrible actions, are you not entitled to the opportunity to rehabilitate yourself and redeem yourself? Yeah, I'm going on way off here, sorry. But it's just something I'm so interested in. And that I think is explored in the book.
Yeah, it's fascinating because we aren't a dichotomy of good or bad. You know, we're all flawed humans. So that's one of the things I love most about the book, I think. So with this book, and you know, you've spoken about some of the things that you wrote about. Was there a part of this story that was difficult to write for some reason, and that could be in a creative sense or the subject matter of the book?
Well, certainly, like there are instances that are not vivid, but certainly depictions of abuse, which are, it's, as I say, I don't go in, there's no real detail there, but I did for the book. I lived in Canberra for a number of years, and that those years intertwined with the Royal Commission, the 2013 Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse. And I didn't work on the commission, but when you're Jewish and you're living in Canberra, you can't really avoid these kinds of things. And I did a lot of research. I read every document related to the various Jewish institutions. So those elements were certainly difficult. But also, I suppose some of the more explorations of mental health were also difficult. There's definitely, as I say, a lot of myself in the book. It's inevitable. I do think that there's not necessary. I do think that there's a direct correlation between, not all the time, for everyone who has a certain experience, but a direct correlation between authenticity and good writing.
Absolutely.
So there's certainly elements of myself in there, and those I don't want to give too much away, but those explorations of mental health issues are certainly my own, and more difficult to write.
Yeah, but they add a depth to the book, I think, and authenticity, as you say. So I suspect I know there are writers in the room, including our readers tonight. So I wondered if you had a piece of advice for early career writers that was along the lines of do not do as I did.
Yeah, so much.
Just one.
Don't do anything I did. I mean, I know people, I've got a baby face and people are like, well, you're so young, but I'm 35, I've been writing for 15 years.
That is so old, Ash.
And it's just, and submitting for equally as long. And I think that's what I would say. Like I really was quite obnoxious when I started.
Can you elaborate?
I just thought, you need to talk to Patrick Mullins, who was my professor at UC. Patrick's brilliant, he's written all these nonfiction books. But I just thought everything I wrote was gold. And it certainly wasn't, but on Submittable, which is largely the most common submission platform software that literary journals use, I can see like that from like what year is it, 2022, like from 2013, 2012, I submitted certain works to Granta, and I'm like, can they, so Granta is this incredibly prestigious British literary journal, and I'm like, can they still see that I did that, because that is embarrassing. You know, and along those lines, like a lot of that work wasn't formatted correctly. I didn't know anything about paragraphing. You know, indent your paragraphs, people, indent them. Learn why you're meant to indent them. And you know, font, oh my God, only use Times New Roman 12, never use anything else. You think it makes you look smarter, but all an editor is doing is saying, hey, you didn't use Times New Roman 12, so do you not know that that's just what everyone does? Like, you know, things like that. Like I would say, you know, it's that old saying, learn the rules before you break them. Learn the rules. I wish I had learned them, and even though some of the work was, all the work was rubbish.
I'm sure that's not.
No, I do wish I had still, you know, abided by appropriate formatting and style and that kind of thing. If the style guides, read them, because I do think that you know, the readers or editors, whomever's reading them, the first thing they will see is you don't have appropriate formatting. So that means, does that mean you don't know it? And then basically you're already so much closer to the rejection. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
That's excellent advice. Don't give them any reason to reject us.
Yeah.
So in regards to your writing, or in regards to this book in particular, was there a favourite part of the book to write?
Yeah, my favorite part is there is a dinner scene between when they're adults, between Ezra and his partner Tegan and Yonatan and his wife Rivka. So it's this great clash of secular and ultra-Orthodox worlds, and look, it is certainly based upon the idea. I did not copy paste anything like certain Miles Franklin long listies.
Alleged.
Sorry. It's it was based upon this fantastic short story by Nathan Englander called What We Talk About When We Talk About Anne Frank, which has a secular Jewish couple having dinner with an ultra-Orthodox Jewish couple, and it's just it's fantastic. A lot of fun to write both perspectives and imagine the way they're viewing each other, and yeah,
It was a lot of fun to read, actually, that particular section. So speaking of fun, what have been the best moments for you, or a best moment since your book was published?
Yeah, the best moment is definitely, you know, it's not just 5-star Goodreads reviews, but there's help. They help.
Sorry, what
The
helps?
5-star Goodreads reviews.
Oh, they help, yes.
Yeah, they help.
Everybody get onto Goodreads.
No, they're wonderful, but it's really the individual readers that reach out, and I have received random emails from people when the book has affected them, touched them in some way.
What's your favourite one? Can you give a specific example?
Um,
Not naming names, but what they said that you really liked.
My favorite one would be the review in the Sydney Morning Herald. That the headline is "Brilliant Debut," and then there's more words, but let's just focus on debut.
I thought we were talking about emails.
Sorry. There was a bookstagrammer who actually, this is effectively the same thing, but he did say it was the best Australian debut. He didn't read your book.
Novel, the best
Australian
novel.
debut novel since Boy Swallows Universe, and
Oh,
we're in
wow.
Brisbane, so
That's fabulous.
big praise.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really good. So with books, you obviously read as well as write. Is there a recent read, obviously excluding mine, that you loved?
Yeah, I was gonna say yours. I feel like
Oh
you,
no.
you knew I would. If you're
No.
happy, Fiona Robertson.
No,
They have
excluding
copies.
mine.
So there's this. I'm a lover of short fiction, as you are, obviously. It is my favorite form of prose. I don't mean to betray my book. It doesn't have ears. I think a short story can be perfect. But next to that, I think the novella probably can too. And so the book I'm going to say is We the Animals by Justin Torres. I don't know if that's how you say his name, but it is this almost, I think, perfect 100 odd pages about a young man growing up in, in poorer circumstances. I believe he has a mixed Hispanic background, and the relationship of him with his brothers. And it's actually written in, I think it might be the first person plural. It's written from the perspective of we, which
is really unusual.
Really unusual, and I don't tend to like any kind of experimental form like that. But I love this book, the rhythm, the cadence. I couldn't recommend it more highly. It was written in 2011, I think, so I don't know why I didn't find it till recently. But oh, that book, yeah.
Big recommendation. We Are the Animals.
We the Animals.
Oh, We the Animals.
Yeah.
So one question that we spoke about me asking you was if there was a question you always wished you would be asked. So what question would you like me to ask?
So that would be that I don't get it often, which is interesting because it's a question when you do a creative writing course. It's like the first thing they ask you is, why do you write? So I'm really interested in that idea, and so I'm going to throw it back at you first. Why do you write, Fiona?
Lots of reasons, but I think primarily I write to get into other people's heads and try and understand why people behave in all the horrible and wonderful ways that they do. What about you, Ash?
Well, you know, when I did this Masters of Creative Writing in Bath, I had this response prepared for that question, and I thought, oh, I'm going to blow them away. I'm so much more interesting than everyone in this room because I told you it was obnoxious, like ask Patrick. But and then the first person, their response was, because when I read and I really connect with the work, it makes me feel less alone, and I want to give that to other people. Then the next person, same response, and the next person, same response, and then it got to me, and I was like, shit. Well, that's that's it. So I don't even know what I said that day. But I've thought about it more, and I don't think that's it anymore. I do think, I think it's something that I've realized actually while going around and talking about this book is like we talked earlier about shame and like I said, people telling me I think this book is about this or that, and I do think that for me this book as well, it wasn't about me. Obviously, when you make a connection with anybody and readers in particular, it's an amazing experience, absolutely. But I do think in the writing of it, it was my trying to, I just navigate the world around me. I do think I write to understand what's going on, what I'm experiencing now, what I've experienced before. I found with some, short fiction, sometimes, you might have an experience that feels poignant, it feels indelible, but then I find I'm not ready to write about it. But then 5 years later, I'm like, okay, this story, it's here now. So for me, writing, I think, is just me trying to understand the world around me. And I think that comes out in this book. And I do think it will come out in future books as well. But it's interesting because it certainly wasn't what I thought about when I was writing it. And interestingly, maybe in 5 years' time, if I have, or less, hopefully, if I have another book published, I'll be answering the same question and have a different response.
Yeah, a number of writers have actually said that their response changes over the years, and so I guess that's pretty likely. So, the final question I would like to ask before I get the wrap up from Jackie is, what is next for you, rising star and author Ash Goldberg? I'm always writing short fiction, as I know you are. So I do want to have a collection one day, but I'm also working on another novel, which is about limerence, which my good friend Anne Casey Hardy, the book comes out in September, Cautionary Tales for Psychical Girls.
introduced me to the idea, though I was already working on the concept, which is, so limerence is, it's obsessive love. It's love, but it's that kind of love where you're, if you want to call it that, it's where you're thinking about a person so much that you get annoyed by day-to-day distractions because they prevent you from your ability to think about that person.
So how is that different from obsession?
Well, there's this whole book that the psychologist wrote. I'm working my way through it.
Okay.
It's called Love and Limerence, yeah, and
We can discuss this
yeah,
later.
there are many papers. Yeah, it's about a young man who has a relationship with an older woman, and he's experiencing that. It's also going to explore certain elements of ultra-Orthodox Judaism and Judaism that are in this book, as well as other themes. So that's it.
Sounds fascinating. So Jackie, are we going to audience questions? Yep. Yeah. So does anyone in the audience have a pressing question for Ash, or even not a pressing question? Any Zoom questions? Yes. All right, well, I'll move on because I have so many questions that I haven't yet asked. I'll move on, and if anyone thinks of a question, just like throw your hand in the air and I'll go to you. So we talked about good things about being published, and you don't have to go into great detail, but what has been something that's been difficult about being published?
Well, I'd say the publicity is quite taxing, actually, even though, even this is a debut literary fiction, I'm certainly not the focal point for the publishing house, but I've been working throughout, really. I work for the state government of Victoria, and I would recommend anyone who has a book coming out taking a big chunk of time off work, because it's just been really exhausting. And we're going to Find the City tomorrow, and I have 2 events there. We were in Canberra last week, myself and my partner. So it's just I would recommend taking a huge chunk of time off work so you can really dedicate yourself, because it's not just that, as you know very well, there's all of the kind of the pressures that you place upon yourself for social media. Somebody reads your book and tells you that you like it, you're like, well, I have to repost that for them, et cetera, et cetera. So look, it's obviously so rewarding, and I'm so grateful to be in this position. But hey, if I were ever granted the opportunity to do it again, I would block out a huge chunk of time.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It is certainly, it certainly takes up time and is a little bit draining, even though it's in a good way.
Yeah.
We have a Zoom question. Shall I finish the mic?
Yes.
So this from a Zoom reader. I'd love to know more about Ashley's writing process and what inspires his short fiction.
I wonder if that's my mom or dad. Yeah, my writing process is I think about my parents, and then my writing process for Abomination, actually, so much of this book got written on residencies at Catherine Susanna Pritchard, and also self-imposed residencies where I took 4 weeks off work and said I'm going to have 20,000 words done in that period of time, or something like that. I currently work 4 days a week and 5 days for writing, but that day is always never for writing. It turns out, all I've done really in the last year, aside from editing of Abomination and subsequent publicity, is a life admin. I mean, you just end up doing the washing or thinking about doing the washing and being like, I really have to get to that washing, and rather than I find I need to immerse myself into in a story, and when I can immerse myself in a story, that's when it's best. As for the origins of my short fiction, it's similar to the book. Always, I do find that I am to an extent autobiographical, but not. It doesn't have to be an experience that I've literally had. It's more about a feeling. I do think that the best short fiction evokes not any particular feeling, but a feeling, from a reader, and does it throughout. and so that it just stays with the reader for however long afterwards. So for me, it'll be perhaps I had a particular experience in a relationship or with a family member, or whatever it might be. Maybe it was a book launch, and I just want to. I'm like, okay, I need to evoke that for 5,000 odd words. So yeah, that's where that comes from.
Right, thank you that again. Next comment on Zoom is, you can let him know it wasn't his mum, lol. Say hi from Bianca and looking forward to reading this book. Smiley face.
Oh, thank you, Bianca. Sorry, Mum.
Poor mum.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, I wanted to know the process on like wrapping up the book and whether that was really difficult or if you'd already planned it for you towards the end.
So the question from the audience was, what was the process in wrapping up the book, or did you already know how it was going to end as you wrote it?
Yeah, I already had it. I'm really structured. I have dot points through the entire thing. I had for each chapter, I'm like, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen while I'm writing, and I do that with short fiction as well. For this next book that I'm working on, I already basically know how it's going to end. I just I can't function any other way. I just need to have everything worked out. I know some writers don't. They sit down and they pray to their writing gods and they just let them speak through them, and that's great. But I can't do it.
So after you did that plot point for every chapter, did anything change very much?
Yeah. So things inevitably change, absolutely. Even prior to the editing process and things like that. Inevitably you go, okay, this idea doesn't work. This doesn't work for this character, doesn't work because I changed that. And that absolutely, but the major things, like I'm not going to give spoilers for the book, but for all of the major things, I had them all. I had them all from day one.
Great. Any other questions in the audience? I have a question. Oh, sorry. You have a question?
I think you sort of answered it earlier on, but when you write about a community you were part of, a religious community particularly, was there any sort of negative pushback? Was there anyone who felt it was that you were betraying what you've grown up with, I guess, those laws and things you were mentioning before?
Yeah, so I'm really no longer active in the Jewish community in Melbourne at all. I don't attend any festivals. I don't really participate. I grew up in Caulfield, so my entire life prior to adulthood in Caulfield, and now live in the north side. So I am quite distanced, but I did expect a lot of blowback, particularly from my extended family, who probably aren't watching. But and I haven't heard any. There has been certainly some. I did do an event at the Melbourne Jewish Writers Festival, and there were certainly individuals that asked questions and said that they felt certain elements. I would say their response came across a little offensive, and I was expecting that. It was actually also a review from a Jewish reviewer that was also of it, had a similar voice, and I expect that. When it comes down to it, the Jewish community, the way I was raised, really, there is this relationship. It's explored in the book that you are Jewish Australians first. You're not Australian Jews, because the Holocaust was only a couple generations ago, and it could happen again. And it's just effectively were you to assimilate, there's no real protection. Your safety is within the community. So I completely understand where that mindset comes from, where that defensiveness, in response to anything that's effectively critical of Judaism. And I think we've seen similar responses in other journal articles and other critiques of elements of any elements of Judaism in recent times.
Have we got time for another question? Any questions out there? No? Okay, so you don't have to answer this, but I did want to know, was there any part of the book that you got really emotional when writing that, really affected you quite profoundly? Because writers do talk about that. I wondered if that happened in this book or not.
Yeah, so those scenes about mental illness that were difficult. There are also certain scenes that I would give away that are based upon they're very relationship oriented, and those may or may not be based upon it's
They
fiction.
are based
It's fiction. Previous relationships, and it's certainly difficult to relive those, and also to the extent where you want, you obviously you want the work to be good, so and you end up rereading the book hundreds of times. So definitely those, maybe not hundreds, but 100 easy. Those parts of the book were certainly difficult to relive that experience again and again, and emotional as well.
And I think that really comes through in the book, and one of the sections of the book, which we probably don't have time for you to do a reading now, but it was, you might, I haven't
Several
really.
minutes, so it's up to
I'll do it.
four.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Do
do
you know
you
what
mind
page
reading
it
the
is?
one that I think I've got it right. There's a particular section of the book that is really just about love, and I found it just beautiful. Now I can't find it. Yes, second one. So if you don't mind, it's on page 64, just from the section break to halfway down the second page. See if you're happy to.
I remember what you said. So this is based when this is from Ezra's perspective. So we had Yonatan's before, and this is Ezra as an adult, sort of reflecting upon his relationship with his partner Tegan. Tegan mentioned love first, soon after they moved in together. One of the countless Sunday mornings spent in bed until a purple-hued sky woke and shook off its clouds to bare early morning blue. Still half asleep, there was no telling which were Tegan's limbs and which his. And Ezra knew if he closed his eyes again, he might forget his need to pee and lapse back into a kind of content he was already feeling nostalgic for. But then Tegan turned to him, pressed her dry lips against his and said, "I love you." Unsure if he were dreaming, he said it back, because awake or asleep, there was no other answer he could give. For all the discussions they'd had about the importance of communication, how they were both intelligent and receptive to each other's opinions, he knew that if he hesitated, even for a moment, their relationship was as good as over. Not because Tegan was the kind of person to overreact, but because the imbalance wouldn't be sustainable. If he'd given her that second, she would have said, "I don't want you to feel any pressure. I'm just telling you how I feel. I don't have any expectations." But whether or not that was true, he knew himself. If he didn't say it, he would feel as though Tegan were assessing his every smile, kiss, and touch, asking herself, "Does he love me yet?" And the thought of his feelings being expected sooner or later to develop into a discernible state of love would get to him, until one day he'd be unable to feel anything other than the ever-present buzzsaw of his own anxiety. And so he said, "I love you too," and gave Tegan a long, delicate kiss while pressing his hand to her cheek, a kiss that he imagined he would give someone he loved.
Thank you for indulging me.
No worries.
It's my favourite book, or one of my favourite. How are we doing, Jackie?
We're ready when you are. We can let people go and buy the book.
Okay, well, before we go, I'd just like to say thank you so much, Ash, for coming all the way to Brisbane tonight to talk about Abomination, and huge congratulations on your brilliant book. And could everybody give a big hand, please? For Ash?
Thanks, Fiona, and thanks Averita for having me here. And I insist on a hand for Fiona and her wonderful job in hosting me here today.
I reiterate, thank you both. That was a terrific conversation. It was fascinating. Thank you all for coming as well. We've made it very easy for you to buy their books. They're waiting for you at the counter. They're both available to do a signing afterwards. So maybe we can get you guys out first before everybody runs to get the books. But please make them, please show your gratitude again for what a great job.
Oh,